Howdy, good morning. It's been 2 days since the last time that I did a video, because I'm pretty sure that the last video that I uploaded, I'm pretty sure the last video that I did was when I was crying at the laundromat. So, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure. So while I was at the laundromat, so I was at the laundromat, I got picked up by my friend who was my roommate last year. And I thought I was going to hang out with both her and my other roommate, but we ended up just staying in town and walking around and hanging out for a while. But she brought me into town. And then she left, and I went to McDonald's and hit up my other friends who live here in town, because they had actually just hit me up. I just hung out with them like last week, and they wanted to hang out again anyhow. So I hit them up, and they had the whole weekend off, so they did want to hang out, and they get off. It was ironic how it happened to work, because at the same time I stopped hanging out with my one friend and she left, she wanted to go home to go to bed, was at the same time that my other friends got off of work, so they wanted to come hang out. And so they picked me up and brought me back to their house, and I stayed there the night before last, and I stayed there last night. So all of yesterday, it was like midnight by the time that they picked no, it was like 1 a.m. by the time that they picked me up 2 nights ago. And then we stayed up until like 5-ish. So then I slept all day yesterday until I think I slept until like noon, maybe like 11, noonish. And so then we just hung out, just chilled for the day. I'm kind of like trying, so like part of this is like this is all just a process, right? And this is literally just, this is just what it is. I can't the best I could do is not post certain things, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to post everything and just deal with it. Which is already a lot, because I know I've already I'm not satisfied with the things that I've made yet, but this is what the process is. My intent and goal is to do as much as I possibly can on my own, as completely self-sustainable as possible, and to really focus on the mentality behind that process, because I think that that's anybody that is going to be able to take anything out of this stuff, that's where they're going to be taking stuff from, I assume. I mean, I guess I really don't know, but that's what I want to do, is kind of use this entire experience as for educational purposes. Because what I've realized, okay, so I've been technically going out and doing this for 10 years, more than that at this point. But yeah, a little bit more than 10 years. I started the idea when I was 18. I just was a little hippie and just wanted to, fuck the man. I wanted to be able to show how we could live without the need of a more federal government. I liked the idea of doing everything locally, grassroots style, and then I also grew up in the technological age of, MySpace and everything. So I always had this, back when I was on MySpace, I'm 16, 17, I had this dream of being able to get all of my friends, all of these different kinds of people from all of these different walks of life together, under the same roof, so that they could all be friends with each other, essentially. But my concept at the time was, to be able to kind of, if they were all my friends, if there was something that they, liked about me and found about me that they would consider me their actual friend, then there has to be something that they share with every single person that I could ever put together in that way, right? I mean, I might be the thing in between them, but at the same time, like, it was never about me really to begin with. Like, what anybody likes about me is, well, I don't know, but like, what, I think that people like me in comparison to other people in ways that, like, because I, like, a lot of people are weirded out by me and really don't like me. Like, they really don't. Like, I rub so many people the wrong way just by being myself. I I used to hate it, and it used to really, really bother me, and it used to be a point of frustration and personal, like, turmoil. I would compromise myself constantly in order to try to appease people because I hated that feeling of rejection. But now I think it's funny. I am thankful for it. People that don't like me, I only want to be around people that, like, really care for me. And I can't dictate that, but I can try to pay as much attention as possible so that I can set proper boundaries, when I notice certain red flags and stuff. And a lot of it's, like, even that I've been doing for a while, and I've come around to where, like, I don't want to constantly be on the defense either. I want to be able just to, like, enjoy and appreciate people as they are and let that be that. So a lot of, like, the type of people that I am close to now has changed over time, but also the people that I'm closer to now are the type of people that, like, could get along with anybody and connect with those people and really see it. My fear was always back then that, like, I had all these different types of friends, and I remember looking back and being like, it's so crazy that I'm so close to this person, because, like, this person would never get along with this other person, or, like, would never know anything about, like, this type of person, sort of deal. And I just thought it would be so nice to get people together. Like, so much of my everything has come from the people that I've met. I spent a lot of time, like, I didn't know how to communicate well as a child, but I couldn't shut the fuck up. I was always kind of in my own anxiety. I put myself out in order to make up for it. So, like, the more anxious I am, the more obnoxious I tend to be. And as a child, I was extremely social. I was also sheltered, but I was extremely social as well. And so, like, to the point where, because I was sheltered, I would try to make friends with essentially anybody I met at any point in time. Where, like, you know, the waitress at a restaurant, or the bag boy at a grocery store, or, like, whatever tenant at a gas station, like, those people became my friends to me. Like, those were people that were just as important and valuable in my life as anyone else. And I don't know, like, I guess also because, like, I never felt like I truly knew people. In my experience, growing up Christian, like, there was kind of this I grew up independent fundamental Baptist, where I was damned from the get-go, just because of the experiences I'd already been through prior to us, joining those churches, or, well, kind of been part of those churches most of my life. There was just always weird shit going on, so I never really, like, necessarily fit in, but at the same time, like, there was always just this impression that people were disingenuous, and that was kind of the goal almost. It was like, it's not about you, it's about being able to portray these standards properly. And so it kind of defied your sense of self, and to have a sense of self, and especially to be able to speak on a sense of self, was considered satanic. And because I was sheltered, I didn't really have full access to generally, honestly, the people like that weren't Christian that I had access to were like, you know, families of addicts and stuff like that, that like, or people, you know, that had disabilities or whatever, mental illness and stuff, that kind of were drawn to the church for a sense of healing. But like maybe they didn't necessarily like, you know, uphold those standards. And I kind of tended to affiliate more with those people in the, I mean, the, you know, little church groups that we had were extremely small. There was only, you know, like, this, I was just talking about the school, to one of my friends, the school that I had, the first Christian school that I went to for 4 years, or 3 years, and 2.5 years, technically. And it was in the basement of a church, and it was kindergarten through 12th grade. So there was literally kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, all the way up to middle school, all the way up through high school. And in the entire school, there was only 72 kids, I'm pretty sure, was how many kids we had during my brother's like graduating class, or the last year that we were there, or whatever. It was entirely small, the classrooms. We had the largest classroom, and I think we had like 10 kids, but most of the classrooms only had like, some of the grades only had like 2 or 3 kids in the entire grade. And that's, you know, that just how it works. That's how it had always worked. I'm sure that there had been times that the only people in a grade were like a couple family members, you know, like a couple cousins or something, because essentially in those small of circles, like, everybody's related somehow. And yeah, I don't know. There was always, I was in church. We went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and then I was in Christian schools. And I wasn't allowed to have non-Christian friends. So like even the people that like weren't Christian that were at our churches, like those were the people I'd always try to affiliate with. And I wasn't allowed to. I'd always be like, I'd literally get grounded for it, or like just disciplined to not spend time with those people. And I kept doing it. But my parents were pretty insistent about like who my friends were to be. And even when like they made allowances for me to make those choices, they never agreed with the choices that I made. And so then they would discipline me about it. And I kept, always like finding myself attracted more to the people that weren't religious. I look back on it now and I realize that like so much of that was just because they were the only ones with that. They were, those experiences were educating me and allowing me the space to get to know myself and to not feel constantly judged, and pretty normal, natural things, I think, even in those ways. But like I think it's all, I don't, the way that they made it seem when I was growing up was that I was always prone to well, and I kind of am, but always always prone to just like trying to find the worst people possible so that I could be as inappropriate as possible. And that's somewhat accurate too. But that's also always been in part because I've never understood why those things are considered bad. Like there's to me, it's just as bad, if not even worse, to delude yourself into believing you're righteous for standards and concepts outside of yourself. And to have to constantly like rely on someone or something else outside of yourself to feel whole and of yourself. I think that's just as detrimental, if not more detrimental, than actively making mistakes based on, low vibrations, carnality that you have to confront and work through. I think that everybody like needs to have their own experiences, and that life isn't just perfect and pretty all the time and isn't our concepts of what those things would be. I think that everything is truly good and acceptable and fine for any individual. It's up to the individual to have their personal relationship with their highest power so that they can be in proper alignment with whatever it is that their destiny is. I don't think it's for other people to say what that is for a person. I think it's hard enough for an individual to even figure those things out for themselves. And I think that when an individual does figure those things out for themselves, it tends to put them in a position of opposition to this system of, like I said, like not even unrealistic standards, but almost just like inhumane standards, like standards of perfectionism in any sense of righteousness or whatever that conflict with the individual being at their fullest capacity. I, I, to, it's, I can't even, to Christian brainwashing. This wasn't even what this was supposed to be about, but this is like a huge thing for me. It's a huge thing for me. Yeah. I mean, okay, so this whole process, right? I want to make it educational. So like, but I also want to make it real. I want to be able to explain my process as I'm going through things, but I also want to be very vulnerable and real about the ways that I feel and why I do the things that I do. It's difficult because I have spent my entire life, suppressing myself for the sake of appeasing people that don't respect me, that don't respect my opinions, that have a set concept as to how things are supposed to be for everyone across the board, believe that they're the ones to enforce those things, and I know how ludicrous that is to let, people like that, when you're aware, control anything. But it's, still been quite a struggle. It's a constant fight. It's a constant, it's just something that I have to work through. It's part of my process, I suppose, but it's also like, okay, these are all such big concepts. So the reason that I have a hard time communicating them consistently or concisely is because as I start communicating, I become aware that there's a lot of nuances and baby steps into the understandings that I have that it took for me to be able to actually understand these things as they are. And I think it's very easy for people to, they just take things at face value in that way. So my concept is always, I was raised Christian, so the concept is that you can't eat steak if you don't know how to drink milk yet, or you have to drink milk and your mother's milk or whatever. You have to have a smaller, more compact form of nutrients that is more concise in order to build onto those more elaborate concepts that are harder to process, and which is obvious. That's just how things work. That's how maturity works. And I want this to kind of be, as much as possible, here's me holding your hand as we do this process together and as we figure these things out. And I'm a friend, so I don't want to communicate things in a way where it's this is how things are done and you're an idiot if you don't do it my way and I have everything figured out. That's not how if you're that way with your friends, you have a toxic relationship with your friends. But I want to be able to to me, the purest form of friendship is to love oneself fully enough that you can be able to actively give of yourself to someone else and that you can actively receive them and of yourself. My incapacities to love myself properly, largely in part just because I wasn't properly educated and had a lot of toxic, behaviors exampled to me most of my life. But um, my concept, of love is that, uh, yeah, that I was so, when I wasn't able to love myself, I tried very, very hard to constantly love everyone else because it kind of seemed like, well, if I can't love myself, at least I can love others, sort of deal. Um, and so I felt like I just couldn't love myself. There was too much that I hated about myself, and I just wasn't willing to accept that. Or I could accept that I hated myself, but I wasn't willing to like accept those things about myself so that I didn't hate myself, right? Um, but I was never like that with other people. I never wanted to hate anyone else. In fact, I would compromise myself in order to make sure that I didn't hate on anyone else. Um, and to like, I would constantly compromise myself for the sake of what I believed was other people's benefit. But I realized in retrospect after, after I was probably like 26 or something, and kind of just looked back on how toxic all of my relationships had been and was trying to analyze that and understand that, and understand my position in that, my responsibility to that. When I realized that when I wasn't able to love myself properly, I didn't have access to what proper love was. So as much as I was trying to give people that concept, true love is never to compromise oneself. Sacrificing oneself for the sake of love is something, but to compromise oneself is not. I believe that the self is the purest form of anything that we have access to in this reality. It's all that we have. It's literally all that we have. We couldn't prove anything without it. So, and it's everything. There's people whose concepts of selves are very different from what would be considered the average concept of self, and those people exist in this realm just as we do, and their reality is quite different from the average reality, and it's no less valuable. It's very much their reality. So like the importance for them would be to, you can't trust what everybody else says because everybody else is in part of a different reality. And the further away you are from the average reality, the less likely you are to be able to receive, advice and stuff from the average reality, because it's just not, um, what's the word, like, important to your reality and your position. And because of that, like what true love requires first and foremost is true self-awareness and compassion of self, love of self, the ability to receive love unto oneself in order to have love to give. You create love within yourself. You do. And there's been times that I haven't loved myself properly, and I've been incredibly unhealthy, and I've still been able to love people. But it was never through the force of my love that happened. It was never my active control over the situation that allowed that love to be transferred. Again, in retrospect, I've been able to realize that when I'm in perfect alignment with myself, which is rare, but every so often I get those glimpses of it, and when I'm in alignment with myself, then what comes out of me is thoughtless and pure. It's not that it's senseless, but it's not something that I have to like actively control at that point. I don't have to worry that the things that are coming out of my mouth are potentially harmful if I'm in a pure state of doing no harm, sort of deal, And like I said, it's not that that's easier, that that's something that I'm, ever constantly in a state of, but that's my ideal. And, I think that you have to be able to receive that unto yourself to have it. You can produce it unto yourself, but what that is really the power of what love truly is, which is a force of the universe that is always working, that is beyond us and works through us and is doing so. And it's more just like your awareness of it at that point, And you can make allowances for it. Like, I don't think that a person has to be in perfect alignment of themselves in order for the universe to use them for its absolute greatest benefit. People being aware and awake, like, well, it is a two-headed sword, or a double-edged sword, or a two-headed beast. Because people, people, I got super distracted. Sorry, because there's kids yelling over there. I'm not trying to be distracted. Holy hell. Okay, what was I saying? God, my ADHD is awful. I'm sorry. That was like literally the most distracting thing ever. Just totally, like, I can still. Okay, so creating love out of oneself, or being love in oneself. Of course, it's like there's always going to be that dichotomy, because there's the act. You can't give something that you haven't actively received unto yourself. Literally, the only way that I could ever convey a message at all is to have received that unto myself. Even if it's something that's coming from myself, I still have to become conscious of it in order to be able to convey it. And I have to be conscious of it in order to process it whatsoever. And if I'm conscious of it but refuse to process it and then just project it, it's not what I think it is. So if love is evident, but I'm not willing to receive it to myself, but I'm willing to give it to other people, what I think I'm giving to other people isn't really love. Because that's simply just not how that works. You can't. I mean, even like, the best chefs, they're not going to serve you something that they haven't tasted for themselves and made sure is acceptable to serve you. And that was really the issue. The love that I was giving, I swore, was exactly what everybody needed. I swore it was the best love, and I would give myself away for everyone else while it was essentially killing me. And I would kill myself for anyone, and that's not love. Those people deserved to also be able to give unto me and to have me receive just as much from them. How prideful and greedy and gluttonous is the concept that love is something I can give everyone else, but I don't need to receive it unto myself, because I want to feel bad about myself so that I can feel really good about the love that I'm giving to everyone, when this entire, like, none of what I just expressed is actual love. That's all ego. And so that's been a big thing for me, because, like, growing up in the church and being so sheltered and being forced to, like, have close relationships with religious people instead of, the thing about religious people is that they tend to they found things for themselves. You know what I mean? Like, they have their truth. They have the thing that they are resting in. So they're not the ones that, like, are seeking or asking for or requiring that energy transference. They're set, and they'll tell you that they are. And when people tell you those things, like, you should believe them. I don't think that, like, I think that religious people, I think there's a difference between people of faith and religious people. I think that many people can use religion in a lot of different ways, but I think there's a lot of people that tend to rely on it for basically their entire identity, and they actually convince themselves that is the ideal, and so they just continue to do that to the point of, like, there's a competition of who can lose themselves the hardest in this, in whatever religion that they have. And that's how it works, and it's sad. But if people get to make their choices. I just think that, like, it's important to be able to recognize those things for what they are, because you don't want to keep putting genuine, actual energy into things that just aren't supporting your highest good or your actual, like, purposes. And my purpose isn't to stroke my ego or to stroke anybody else's ego or to remain limited just because it's comfortable or convenient. Those are the very things, like the very fundamental things that I'm actively in defiance of. And I think that it's important to be that way for anyone that feels that they should be. You know, I can't speak on the people that find themselves selling out to whatever. If that's what's good for them, that's what's good for them. Obviously, the way I perceive it is that they're selling out, because I believe that our highest calling as an individual is to know ourselves and to be in fullest capacity of ourselves, to receive this world in all of its wholeness and all of its goodness through our purest forms. But, you know, that just would be the most reasonable thing. I think that we're at the way that, you know, time works isn't at all linear. I think it's all right on top of itself. So I think there's a lot of people existing right now that are technically like, they really are back from hundreds of years ago in ways like their souls haven't evolved in a lot of different ways. And so like, they're just, that what they're in is part of their process. I think it's important. I obviously judge people, but like at the same time, I think that, I mean, that's a sin of mine. Like, it's important not to judge people for the fact that you really don't know. You can't know shit. You can't know a person's heart, and you don't know their highest power. They don't even know their highest power. You know what I mean? Like, that's the hardest thing. I think that that's the whole reason why, like, so many of these systems become oppressive, and I can't support so many of these systems, is because truly all they end up doing is just like distracting, suppressing, convincing people that their highest calling, that their highest power is somehow inaccessible to them. And those are vampiric systems often, where those that are in, you know, control of those systems are just living off of the energy that they're sucking out of these people's willingness to compromise themselves that way. And, you know, it's insane to me, like, especially with Christianity, like, I have such a hard time with that, because, like, I do see it as truly demonic. I think the Bible is a great book, but I definitely don't think it's supposed to be read the way it generally is in churches. And I think it's being actively used to, you know, suppress the masses and dissuade the masses from knowing their highest selves. And all of that's because human beings are an incredible source of energy, okay? I was just talking about this yesterday, where, like, the way that Einstein kind of depicted the way that reality works as far as all of these other dimensions is that there's all these dimensions that are essentially like sheets. Like, you know, they're like, space is like all of these different sheets, and time is the way that these sheets are moving. It's like they're all just kind of like waving, and sometimes they're generally waving on top of each other, but sometimes they touch, and sometimes they even intersect. And it's at those points in times that you gain access to education from the past or from the future, or a deeper sense of knowledge through oneself, of being able to see oneself from that third person perspective in that way. And that essentially what we are, and as humans specifically, like, compared to any other life form, because of our sentience, because of our capacity to become self-aware unto these things, we become this source of energy where not only are we constantly pulling in, we're also directly pushing through, but we're also able to manipulate through the siphon through the siphon, in order to we can take that energy and suppress that energy within ourselves, or we can just let it out, or we can actually amplify certain energies as well. And the power of that is that, being unaware, you can actively amplify negative energy transference without even being aware that that's what you're doing. Or even worse, you can actively, intentionally amplify negativity through access of yourself. And I don't know, I feel like if people, like, really genuinely saw the bigger picture, they would be less prone to run to religion for comfort and for solace, and they would be able to stand on their own 2 feet and be like, okay, no, I can reason with these things and I don't need something external to keep validating my beliefs. I can validate my own beliefs through my experience. And so a lot of like what's always driven me into these concepts of living in such extremes, like the way that I am kind of right now is, which I really don't feel like it is, but like to be honest, like I think this where we're at right now, like this is what kind of is necessary for I think a lot of the shifting to happen into what we should be living like. But um, sorry, I think I woke people up. So I'm gonna go walk to McDonald's and we'll go from there.